We are going through some changes in the Division of Dietary Supplement Programs over the last few years, and I hope to see more over the next few years, so I just wanted to give a little preview of that as much as possible. And this slide and the next slide are really standard to my presentation. It's just giving you an idea of how we got to where we are regarding dietary supplement regulation. Obviously, the main one that we focus on is the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, or DSHEA, and how that amended the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. That obviously lays out the major framework for dietary supplements, but there are a lot of other laws that you need to be aware of. Starting with we call it the Bioterrorism Act. That was the initial requirement for facilities to register with FDA, food facilities, excuse me. That was updated with FSMA to renew your registration every 2 years. Hopefully everyone does that. I believe that comes up again in 2016, the end of 2016. We also had the Allergen Labeling Act, so that's the requirement to label the major allergens. The SAER law, or the Adverse Event Reporting Law, that was the requirement for dietary supplements and OTC firms, but we're focused on dietary supplements, to submit their serious adverse events to FDA. It's really important to us. It kind of gives us a post-market monitoring aspect of the products and ingredients that are on the market. And then, of course, the FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is, as Michael and Mike Taylor like to talk about, the biggest change to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act since 1936? 38, thank you. Which lays out, of course, the framework for foods. Jenny discussed it. I have, I think, one slide on FSMA, which is just that dietary ingredient suppliers need to be preparing rapidly. Dietary supplement manufacturers cannot ignore it, though. There's some really good questions out there about how does it affect dietary supplements. We will be working our way through that, I think, making sure that the two rules, I was more thinking FSVP, but preventive controls as well, how they complement 111 to make sure that we're not contradicting each other, making sure we're all kind of moving in the same direction. We don't want to duplicate efforts, which is why dietary supplements were exempted, of course. So that's how we got here, and where are we right now. So the Division of Dietary Supplement Programs is, we call it the program office at FDA. We are all things dietary supplements, obviously. We work with offices throughout FDA. We work with the Office of Regulatory Affairs. They actually do the inspections, your districts. We work with, any compliance action, we have to work through the Office of Compliance. We work with the other centers, Center for Drugs, Center for Biologics, where appropriate. But ideally, anything dietary supplements will somehow touch our office, go through our office at some point. So we're the program office. We are 26 FTEs. We're 26 full-time employees. I would like to have this fantastic statement that we're doubling in size, but we don't have that. We are 26 FTEs, and we'll probably stay around that level for the next year or two, but we are trying to make the case to grow even bigger as the industry grows bigger. We direct the dietary supplement activities as much as possible. We review dietary supplement and ingredient safety. That's done, as I just said, through adverse event reporting. We have a medical officer who reviews the adverse events. We have a new dietary ingredient review team. They review, as stated, the new dietary ingredients. They also review other ingredients, possibly old ingredients. They may very well be our subject matter experts if there's an old ingredient that is demonstrating safety problems. We review GMP, good manufacturing practice, misbranding and claims, compliance actions. They all come through our division. And then we're also the expert witnesses for the dietary supplement cases as they move through the system. Because, again, we're the program office. So if I refer to that, that's really what I mean. And just a picture as the industry is growing, we're discussing how are we doing on our regulatory activities? Are we doing it right? So stepping back and taking an evaluation of what's happening in our industry. The first line here, 445 tainted products have been identified since January 2010. Now, I will say that those are not dietary supplements. These are tainted products, tainted with an active pharmaceutical ingredient, a drug. They're not dietary supplements. They are illegal products. They're unapproved new drugs. But they play in our space, so they affect all of us. They affect the industry because you have these firms that are trying to sell illegal drugs marketed as a dietary supplement. They also play in our space. Now, the authority is if it's a drug, which these are drugs, they're actually handled by the Center for Drugs, or CDER. But they play in our space because media reports want to know about all these dietary supplements that are tainted, and then the question comes to us, and then we have to correct them, direct them to the appropriate center, etc. So they affect the overall impression of the industry. Inspections as a whole, GMP, label inspections, import detentions. We've been increasing those inspections since 2008, a very sharp increase once the GMP rule was implemented for the different firm sizes. And I've said it before, I'll cover it here. The percentage of non-compliance official action indicated is the term, or OAI, is what I'll be using. That's really demonstrating kind of serious non-compliance, where the agency has to follow up on something. And we're seeing a very high percentage from the FDA, or I'm sorry, from the dietary supplement inspections. Numbers as high as 25 to 30%. These are not new percentages for you all. I know I say it year in and year out, but that's because it's not changing. It's not changing fast enough. So I will continue to use this stat until it drops to a more acceptable number. We'll cover that later on. New dietary ingredient notifications, or NDI notifications. That's been a requirement since DSHEA. The regulation has been out since '97, so coming up on 20 years, give or take a year or two, and we have, we're not quite yet at 900 notifications submitted for that entire time. We have less than 50 annually. A given year we might jump over the 50 mark, but really generally we have 30 to 40 notifications a year. I don't have the statistics on how many new ingredients are going to the market each year, but my gut instinct is that it's a lot more than 30 to 40. So we have concerns on the new dietary ingredient notifications. Part of that is also, you need to submit a notification, but then we also want it to be a good notification. We want to get a positive response. So only a quarter of those have been acknowledged. Again, an approximation. Acknowledgement is another FDA terminology. It's basically a good day letter. That means it's as much of a good day letter as you're going to get from us on NDI notifications. Basically, it means we acknowledge your submission and we have no objections at this time. But we want to see that percentage go up. We want to see more notifications and we want to see more acknowledgements. And then, as I said before, we review the adverse events. That's both the mandatory ones, so those serious ones that firms have to submit, and the voluntary ones. Voluntary ones are a great resource. It's a lot of data. We have to mine through it, but to be able to see if there are any signals. Maybe it doesn't rise to the level of a serious adverse event, but if we're constantly seeing something on the same ingredient or the same product type, that might be something that we need to look into. So the inspectional compliance numbers. I have 5 years of data here, 5 years that are really applicable to the majority of the dietary supplement firms. Really wish I had fiscal year 15 in there. I do not. While the government has actually switched over to FY16, that as of October 1st, we give the districts a month to get all of their data from 2015 into the system before we lock it down. So the numbers, they really didn't want to give me the numbers. So I only have through FY14. But you can see a drastic increase in number of inspections, starting around 200. We got as high as 667. This is both domestic and foreign. I should note. We got as high as 667 in fiscal year 13. Dropped down a little bit for 14. What I would like to see is it leveling off right around 500. If we can keep that consistently, I think we can make some strides in the industry. And so I said before about OAI, which is official action indicated. Again, that's the bad one. We don't really want to see that number go any higher. Voluntary action indicated, or VAI, is in the middle. A voluntary action indicated means you had an inspection, there were some observations, but it doesn't rise to the level that a follow-up is required by the agency. You're working on coming into compliance. You might end up with a conclusion of voluntary action indicated. The one that we'd really like to see increase is NAI, or no action indicated. That's really the column that the industry wants to be in. An inspection goes through and there are no observations. There are no 483s. That would be a great column to see increase. They're very consistent over the last few years, for better or worse. And the top violations of the GMP rule, so 21 CFR 111. This is actually an average of those 5 years that I just showed you. These are the most commonly cited violations. And there's a lot of little numbers on there. You can take your time and go through it with a copy of the rule. Any given year, they may switch places a little bit. I believe for the last year, the third column actually moved to the top. And so there's a little bit of juggling around in there, but really the top 10 are consistently the top 10. And unfortunately, these are basics of a GMP system. So I'm going to go through a few of these columns. They're not numbered, but the tallest bar is 21 CFR 111 75A1. The 75A1 is identity testing, dietary ingredient identity testing. Unfortunately, we're still seeing a lot of firms that are not testing their dietary ingredients 100% of the time. There is, of course, an opportunity to request an exemption from that, but otherwise, you have to do it 100% of the time. Every dietary ingredient has to be identity tested. And that's a good practice anyway, by the way. You really want to know what you're working with. 21 CFR 111 103 is SOPs, or procedures for quality control, making sure quality control knows what they're doing and how to do it regularly, consistently. 21 CFR 11170E, so I'm just going down the first three bars there. 70E would be the requirement to establish finished product specifications. Again, a really basic thing. You need to know what product it is you're starting out to make. The identity, the purity, strength, composition, the limits on contaminants for the finished product. That's really important. So if we, taking kind of a worst case scenario here, you start off, you don't know what type of product you're making. You're not testing the ingredients as they come through into the facility. You don't know what type of product you're making. You don't really know how it left the facility. I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot for those firms, and that's not really what we'd like to see. Now, I will give credit where credit is due. The first few years, the first several years, a lot of these violations were a lack of anything, a lack of identity testing as a whole. Again, credit where credit is due. As we were moving through the system, maybe now the violation, you will end up with the same violation, but it's not necessarily a lack of any identity testing. It might be a lack of, we went through some of the products and we went through the paperwork associated with the documentation and noticed that some of the ingredients were not tested for identity. Some were, some weren't. Well, that's still a violation. So we need to get to 100% on that one. So again, there are some finished product specs, but there are not all the required finished product specs. So again, we're seeing some progress. It's not documented yet in the violations because the violation is still there. It still exists. Kind of scooting through the rest of those, 111.553, we're talking about a lack of a review for product complaints, which is really important. If there's a problem with your product, that could very well be a GMP problem, a manufacturing issue that could be cleared up. It needs to be investigated. It needs to be closed out. 111.75C would be finished product testing. Now, that one is going to be a little less than establishing finished product specs because there are some people that don't have specs and don't test because they don't have a spec against with which to test. Once you have a spec, then you're going to see more of the charge of lack of testing. 75A2 actually fits in with qualification of your supplier. For all the other component specifications, non-dietary ingredients, limits on contaminants, that's the testing for the other components. 255 and 205, we're talking about batch production records and master manufacturing records. I don't understand how it can be, but still 5 years, 7 years in, we're still seeing firms that don't have an MMR, a master manufacturing record, for every formulation and every batch size. It's very clear. You need that. Again, credit where credit is due. Some of these violations could very well be they have most of their manufacturing records, but they don't necessarily have all of them, or they lowered one batch size and forgot to make a master manufacturing record out of it, something like that. But still, it's a violation. Batch production record, making sure all the required elements of the batch production record are there. So they may have a batch production record, but they don't have everything they need in there. And that's really easy to clean. I apologize. It's not necessarily easy to clean up. But that's something that the investigator is always going to look at, because we tell them to go through, a certain number of products. So they're going to dig through a certain number of products. They're going to go in and pull a couple batch records and say, where's the master manufacturing record for this? And where's all of the testing? And try to get a complete picture of what happened with that product when it was being made. That's what a batch production record provides. So, again, we're always going to see these top violations. I think there'll be some juggling around, but what we'd like to see is more of the examples where it's not a complete lack of everything, but maybe it's just not good enough. It's not adequate. GMP regulatory outcomes. So when there is an issue with noncompliance, there will be some sort of follow-up from the agency. What you're seeing is an increase in warning. So the columns across are injunction. INJ is an injunction. The legal action to actually shut down operations. Seizure would be the next one over. Depending on what type of facility we're working with, it might be better to shut down operations, make sure they're not producing anything, or it might be that the most appropriate action for this firm is to seize the product, depending on what type of facility it is. Warning letters is, again, our public notification that there's a problem with the facility. Warning letters are, we're always going to see a high number of warning letters if we have this high percentage of OAI. Untitled letter, UL, looks a lot like a warning letter, but it's not made public. Why would we send an untitled letter versus a warning letter? Different reasons. It could be that there was a delay somewhere in the process, the evidence is getting a little stale, but we want to make sure the firm knows there are problems with their operations or with the response to their operations. They need to know if they are doing it wrong. So we might send them something that looks really a lot like a warning letter, except it's not posted on our website and there's a different header on the top. And then the last one is a regulatory meeting. That's where possibly the firm is making some progress, but we want to make sure they're aware of the full picture that they need to take into account. So we might call them into the facility. Call them in. This would be actually going to the district office. They might call them into the district office where they can have a sit-down with the investigator, with the compliance branch, and then often we'll have the center on the phone as well. So, and I think that we've made some progress just earlier on in 2015. There was a batch of warning letters that went out on a few different ingredients. I actually like to see this increase over the next year or so. But again, it's important for us to let firms know when we see a lot of some ingredient that we don't think is an appropriate ingredient. So the first one, we send out 14 warning letters on products containing DMBA or AMP citrate. According to our review, AMP citrate may be a dietary ingredient, but if it's a dietary ingredient, it's a new dietary ingredient, and there was no notification on it that makes the products adulterated. Any product that has that is adulterated. So 14 letters went out. The next product listed there is BMPEA. It was getting very confusing at the agency when we were throwing around all these letters, but 5 warning letters on products listing BMPEA as an ingredient. Our review, BMPEA is not a dietary ingredient, doesn't fit the definition. If it doesn't fit the definition and you list it as a dietary ingredient, your product is misbranded. So there were 5 letters on that. And then most recently, there were 5 warning letters on products that were basically a bag of pure powdered caffeine, bulk pure powdered caffeine. They were labeling as a dietary supplement. Now, caffeine is a dietary ingredient, I understand, but we're talking about pure powdered caffeine, and a lot of it was being sold and expecting consumers to weigh out or measure out a very small amount. So we said they were adulterated, those products. They were adulterated because they pose a significant or unreasonable risk of illness or injury. We've also seen a little increase in legal actions, civil and criminal cases. There was a nice article earlier on, actually just, I think it's the beginning of this week, where this firm, Sunset Natural, had entered into consent decree, which is basically they agreed, okay, fine, we'll enter into permanent injunction with the FDA. That actually marked 7 legal cases, civil and criminal cases from FDA in 2015, which was one more already than all of 2014. So I'm not sure that we're going to get any more out in the rest of 2015, but if we would, again, that would just be an increase. And that's really important. We can send warning letter after warning letter, but that doesn't really get through to certain people. So making sure that we can, if necessary, shut down their operations. And a couple other notable ones from 2015. This was another firm that entered into consent decree. And part of the decree, that was actually January 2015, part of the decree said, required the firm under FDA supervision to recall and destroy all supplements between September 1, 2011 and January 15, 2015. So 4 years worth of product that had been sold. It was adulterated. It was not compliant, GMP compliant. I believe claims were also included in this. So that's a big win. We want to make sure that they shut down operations, but also remove whatever adulterated product that's out there. So recalling it. We also had a nice one. This actually was finally finished off in, I think, early February of 2015. We started it, the initial release was in October of 2013, where we first initiated action against this Oregon dietary supplement manufacturer. This one lingered on. This was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears for the Dietary Supplement Program Office. Finally, on February 5, 2015, United States District Court for the District of Oregon, Judge Simon ordered a permanent injunction against the firm. And part of his statement was really nice, actually. He said, in his opinion, he said, defendants also claim to have made substantial good faith efforts towards compliance. Not only is that untrue, it is irrelevant. Good faith is not a defense to violations of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And that's true. It's technical. It doesn't matter that you want to be compliant or that you're trying to be compliant. You have to be compliant. So, this firm was certainly giving us troubles, and they drug it out as long as they could. They were promising that they were going to do better, and this judge heard that and said, no, I don't agree. So that was nice. So what are we going to do? I said that's what I'd like to talk about, is the insight into what we're going to do. As true FDA or government fashion, let's do more with less. Or maybe not less, but the same. So do more, be better with the same amount of resources. So what we're doing is we're taking an opportunity to assess how we're currently handling dietary supplement regulation. Are we doing it right? Are we using our tools appropriately? Could we use them better? We're going to turn that into a strategic plan. How do we elevate our dietary supplement program? How do we be better with the same resources we have? Maybe we are using our tools appropriately. How can we expand our toolkit? And one way to do that is, not necessarily with more authority, but let's be strategic in who we're working with. So what we want to do is we want to work more with external partners, other federal agencies, state agencies. We definitely want to work with them. But not just them. We also want to work with industry. How can we work better with industry? Again, I can get up here and pound my fist and shake my finger, but maybe that's not the best way to do it. Maybe we need to adjust our path and see what we can do with industry to get everyone more compliant. And we want to capitalize on this opportunity. We want to do it right. So if we're looking to change up how we're handling it, how do we do it right? So we want to hear from industry. We need to make sure that what we're doing is appropriate, we want to make sure that we're doing it right. On GMP compliance, we want to identify the good players. So again, maybe instead of telling everyone how horrible it is, maybe we could say, it's we're not quite there yet, but these people are there. Let's identify those good players. Not by name, of course, but product type or firm type. Who are the people who are largely compliant? make sure everyone else wants to be in that space too. And we can't keep sending warning letters. We don't want to be a paper tiger. We want to move to the legal actions. We want to stand behind what we say. If this firm has demonstrated repeated noncompliance, then we need to move to the step of shutting down operations or seizing their product, taking away their toys. We also need to get into every facility. We need to get through our inventory because we haven't done that yet. So over the next few years, we want to make sure that we can close out the inventory at least once. So one of the good players that we have been able to identify is throughout our inspections, the large firms, so more than 500 FTEs, 0% OAI rate so far. So that's great. That's fantastic. There aren't a lot of large firms in the dietary supplement industry, but those that are compliant, largely compliant. So that's a good space, and we want to talk about that. Who are the other players that want to be in that space? Is there a group that I would think that firms that have a brand name recognition, a good reputation, want to keep that good reputation because those warning letters, seizures, injunctions, that's all very public. So they want to make sure that they can retain that reputation. What are some product types that are largely compliant? We want to try to identify those over the next couple years. NDI notifications. Before I get a question on it, I do want to say that the revised draft NDI guidance, it's not out yet. We want it out. I understand. I have no update on that. But we do understand that it's important for industry. There was a lot of confusion when we put out the draft guidance in 2011. We heard it. We heard you all. We assessed the comments, working on drafting and publishing that revised draft guidance. After we can do that, there will be a comment period, and we want to hear from industry. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What still is confusing? We did try to add a lot of clarification in there. And what do we expect from that? Well, we expect a higher number of submissions. We do think that there is under notifying out there. I don't necessarily have the stats on that, but we fully expect that there are more than 900 new ingredients that should have been submitted over the last 20 years. So let's move ahead with more submissions and a higher number of acknowledgments. We want to see more than 25% acknowledgement. So what can we do to make that right? We want to make sure people are aware what we think is appropriate for a good NDI notification, a solid one, a complete notification. FSMA implementation. This is my only slide on it because you don't need to hear from me on FSMA implementation. You want to hear from Jenny on that. What I would say is dietary supplement firms, you can't ignore it. Preventive controls, you're exempt, sure, I get that. But it affects your ingredient suppliers. That could very well affect your supply chain. And then there are other rules shortly behind preventive controls that do affect dietary supplement manufacturers. So the foreign supplier verification, again, hopefully coming out soon, that's something that supplements are not exempt from. So that's an opportunity to prepare as much as possible, be aware of the changing responsibilities. And dietary ingredient suppliers, there's a lot of preparation, I think, that's needed. So as much as possible, listening to the education that FDA has put out, and then using the resources that are there. So using that technical assistance network, trying to get the questions answered as much as possible. So thank you. Apologize for going over my time, I'm guessing.
Cara, we're going to take a few questions.
Bill Franco's with Herbalife. Cara, I have a question that is troubling me, and I'm hoping you can answer. The Office of Dietary Supplements has a dietary supplement label database that's been online now for several years. I talked to Paul Coates about how the FDA is using that database, and I specifically complimented him on their having about 30,000 labels getting into their database a year. Yet, when I asked him, is there any review to make sure that a 30-day notification has been submitted on those products, he said there really is no interaction. In the database, there are labels for products that have been identified as having been adulterated with drugs. So my question is, how does FDA view the Office of Dietary Supplements label database, and what can the public take away from seeing a label on that database and what FDA thinks about the regulatory acceptability of that label? Long question, but
Yeah, it was a
very
long
important.
question. The Office of Dietary Supplements has a different mandate than FDA. So we are the regulators. They are providing the education and the resource. So right there's a separation in responsibilities. I can't speak to what they should or shouldn't do with the Dietary Supplement Label database, but I can say that we want to. So one of these strategic alliances that we want to build up is working better with the Office of Dietary Supplements. What strengths, what resources do they have that we can take advantage of? What strengths and resources do we have that they can take advantage of? I have no insight as to how or if the Dietary Supplement Label database would ever change. That's got to be something that comes from NIH. But I will say that, anecdotally, we do use the Dietary Supplement Label database because FDA doesn't always have a good picture as to what's on the market. So we use it just like I hope the consumers and industry uses it as to what's being sold out there. It's a great resource for grabbing a label and seeing how it works. So when we identify ingredients that we think that need to be removed from the market, that is one resource that we will go to figure out which products are using it. So on our end, we are using it internally, but we don't have a formal working relationship with NIH on the DSLD. We do like to discuss with them, and I think that's a topic of how to make it better. How can we do more with the same?
I wanted to ask a question of Cara. Cara, thank you for your comments. You indicated that FDA wants to work more with external partners, other agencies, and specifically with the states. Industry is well aware of the actions of the New York State Attorney General. Can you comment on how FDA will engage with Schneiderman's office and with the Association of Attorneys General, specifically on the East Coast? And my real concern relates to the fact that large companies have settled with the AG, indicating that they will employ DNA barcoding technology for identity testing. Of course, the dietary supplement GMPs at Part 111 require a scientifically valid method and a reliable test method without mandating any specific method. So could you comment on that, please?
We are working with the state agencies in that we are talking with them right now. We want to, again, what insight can we provide to them so that their actions are well-founded? But they're not responsible to us. They don't answer to us. They don't have to clear their actions with us ahead of time. So we're working on building up that relationship, making sure we're communicating with them as much as possible before actions are done. And we're supportive of their actions. Largely supportive of it. I can't say every single one of them would be how we would have handled it, but they are using their toolkit to clean up the industry, which we are supportive of. So does that answer your question? We're communicating with them as much as possible, providing insight into what actions they want to do.
Thank you.
Sometimes states can move faster than the federal side of it.
Yes, and
so there might be something where they can handle more appropriately than we can handle.
And hopefully FDA is educating them on the federal legal and regulatory framework.
Absolutely.
Hi, I've got two questions, one for Jenny, one for Cara. Jenny, with the implementation of FSMA and with the massive amount of manpower that's going to be required for auditing bodies and chemistry labs and such, what is the vision on how to recruit, train, prepare the manpower required to do said work? Are we going to see a training program from the FDA, maybe a partnership with existing parties right now? And then my second question was for Cara. The centralization of the FDA units, kind of like the disbanding of the district offices. What was the purpose behind that? Is it to do more with what you have, or per se with less? Thank you.
I guess since I got the question first, I'll answer first. You're right. The implementation is going to go on for a long time now, and we are committed to devoting resources to training. That's why we funded Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance, the Produce Safety Alliance, the Sprout Safety Alliance, to develop training with respect to their respective rules that apply. That is going to be, those are be programs where there'll be train the trainers. It's going to mushroom out. There will be, there are a lot of training entities out there now. They'll become trainers, and this is just going to explode, I think, exponentially. There will be good trainers. There will be not so good trainers. It's anyone's guess. And ultimately, there'll be a market correction because we're not going to be going into facilities and saying, who did your training? And that's not good enough. We're going to be going in and saying, what's your food safety plan? And that maybe that's not good enough. And maybe the reason it's not good enough is because you were inadequately trained. You spoke also to labs. I think this is all going to be a private sector responsibility because I think that we find that when the demand is there, it will be filled, and so they will be developing the cadre of people to work in the labs, likewise the inspection force. I'm a little more concerned about the third-party certification bodies and having enough auditors for the auditing that is going to be taking place in the future because, as you know, we've had problems with auditing in the past, not having the right auditors in the right facilities. Again, another program that's going to build over time, but there are some good programs, good benchmarks out there in the GFSI, and I guess it'll all shake out in the end.
Just one last one from the audience.
Hold on. Actually, sorry, Mark. I'm going to cut you off. I just wanted to not answer the question, the second part of the question on changes to the district offices. That's a decision made far above my pay scale. Maybe Jenny's pay scale, but far above my pay scale.
Nope.
Yeah, far above both of our pay scales. I can honestly say that. Any changes to how the districts are going to handle inspections is really coming from how to implement FSMA. So that's not a dietary supplement thing. That's a food as a whole thing. And I'm definitely looking forward to how that can strengthen because ORA, the boots on the ground, are really important to how everything gets implemented, how we get information to facilities, and then how we get it back to the center as well. So looking forward to how that will help. Sorry, Mark.
Just let me play on one thing Cara said there, though. There's a big focus on FSMA and how we're going to train our inspectors, the inspection force with respect to FSMA, but there are also other regulations out there that they have to inspect too. I think, though, you are going to see some benefit from our training the kindler and gentler FDA as we move forward, because we're trying to train inspectors in systems thinking, food safety culture, and things like that, and be a little bit less, the checklist and the gotcha type of mentality. So hopefully that will spill over into all types of inspections.
Good morning, Mark Blumenthal, ABC. Cara, I would like to go back to your previous question, and forgive me if I missed some nuance or some qualification on that. I want to be clear on this. Are you saying that the agency would support any type of state actions by state regulatory or law enforcement agencies that are based on either inappropriate analytical methods, questionable analytical methodology results, that nevertheless the agency would still support such actions even though you might do it differently?
No, I would not say that. But I appreciate you being a little more specific with your question. It's not that we would support any action, like carte blanche. No, we need to, in general, we support the actions of external groups to clean up the industry. That's even self-regulatory actions that the industry puts into place for themselves. And you're obviously getting at the specific issue of the DNA barcoding and was that appropriate, was it inappropriate? I can't speak to that. I don't know the details of how the New York State AG in the testing. So I cannot speak to if that was appropriate or inappropriate. What I can say is FDA, we don't use DNA barcoding on our end for identity testing of finished products. We don't require DNA barcoding for identity testing for dietary ingredients. We require that dietary ingredients be tested for identity. You have to use the method that is, as Holly was saying, is appropriate, scientifically valid, fit for purpose. It doesn't work for anything. I don't think DNA barcoding works for vitamin C powder. So we can't require one method. I forgot what I was going to say, but that's what I was going to say. But I do think that regardless of the methodology, it uncovered a problem with the agents or with the industry, that maybe the products out there aren't appropriate, or maybe the methodology they're using isn't appropriate. So in that respect, we want everyone to be stepping up to the plate. And how can we make sure consumers feel safe with the product, are satisfied with the product, that it's a quality product going out, that it's a high quality, it is what it says it is product every single time. And that's what GMPs in general are supposed to be. But a lot of what was in Jenny Scott's presentation, flexibility and making sure we're flexible, it's really important for the GMPs as well. Dietary supplement GMPs are written flexibly. We can't mandate you always use one test, but we can mandate that it be testing heavy, and you need to know what's most appropriate for your product because you are the experts on your product. We will grill you on them, even a kinder, gentler FDA. It is important to grill you to make sure that we know what what methodology you're using is appropriate. No, I can't say that we would always support every action. But that's the part, and when I say qualified, is that they don't answer to us. We could tell them, yes or no, we do or we don't support it. They can still do it. They don't even have to talk to us before they do it.